Hey friends, welcome back to Botanic Haven. If you're new here, this is our little corner of the internet where we talk about gardening, caring for plants, and turning balconies, windowsills, backyards, and even tiny patios into peaceful green spaces. Today I want to talk about something a bit provocative but very real. If people truly understood a few simple things about how food grows and how easy it is to produce a surprising amount of it at home, a big part of those crazy food prices would simply not survive. There's a reason nobody at the top is in a hurry to explain this to you. Before we dive into tips and tricks, I want you to imagine something. Picture a normal family, nothing fancy, living in a small apartment or an old house with a modest yard. Nothing Instagram perfect. Now imagine that. Bit by bit, they start growing herbs on the windowsill, a few tomatoes in containers, lettuce in a box, some potatoes in a big bucket. They compost their kitchen scraps, save seeds, swap a few cuttings with neighbours. It doesn't look like much at first, but month after month, shopping trips get smaller. Some products simply disappear from their grocery list. Now multiply this by thousands or millions of people doing the same thing. You can feel why the big players wouldn't be thrilled about that, right? I'm not talking about running away to a farm or becoming fully off-grid. Most people don't have that option. I'm talking about realistic, doable steps that gradually shrink your dependence on the supermarket. Because a lot of what you pay for in stores is not the vegetable itself. You're paying for packaging, transport, marketing, middlemen, rent for a huge building with bright lights and loud music, and the profit margin of every company involved. When you harvest a handful of tomatoes from a pot by your door, you cut through that whole chain in one move. And no loyalty card in the world can compete with that. Let me tell you about Daisy. She's not a professional gardener, not a YouTuber, not an influencer. She works an office job, comes home tired like everyone else, and used to joke that she could even kill a cactus. One year, after seeing food prices go up again and again, she decided she'd at least try to grow something. She bought one bag of potting mix, one rectangular container, and a small packet of lettuce seeds. That was it. 3 weeks later, she was cutting soft green leaves for her sandwiches. Then she realized something wild, that one packet of seeds cost less than a single bag of washed gourmet salad at the store, and yet it fed her for weeks. The trick was not that Daisy suddenly became a gardening genius. The trick was that lettuce grows insanely fast, doesn't need perfect conditions, and you can harvest it leaf by leaf instead of pulling out the whole plant. Nobody in a supermarket ad is going to say, you can grow this entire bag of salad on your window for a fraction of the price. It's just not in their interest. And Daisy didn't stop there. The moment she tasted the difference between her homegrown lettuce and the tasteless store pack that wilted after 2 days, something changed in her brain. She started to ask, what else have I been overpaying for? Now, I'm not saying you'll suddenly never need to buy food again, but there's a huge middle ground between buy everything and grow everything. And this middle ground is exactly what most people never explore. That's where your power lies. You start with herbs because they're forgiving. Basil, mint, parsley, chives, maybe thyme or oregano. These are plants that happily live in pots, tolerate beginners, and don't require you to be home all day. One small windowsill herb garden can already replace a lot of those overpriced plastic boxes of fresh herbs that go bad in the fridge after 2 days. It also makes your cooking instantly better. At this point, you might be thinking, yes, herbs and lettuce are cute, but I still need real food. That's fair. So let's talk about density. Most people drastically underestimate how much food a small space can produce if you choose your crops wisely. Cherry tomatoes in a pot, a dwarf pepper in a bucket, a vertical tower of strawberries or leafy greens. Potatoes grown in a fabric bag or an old bucket. Radishes sown between slower plants. If someone had calmly explained to you in school that a 1 square meter box can give you salads for months, you would probably look at supermarket prices very differently today. If this guide has helped you, write one in the comments. And if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. Let's move from theory to something you can literally do this week. Pick one spot in your home, a sunny windowsill, a balcony corner, the front steps, or even a bright spot under a grow light. Commit that this spot will no longer be decorative only. It will produce food. You don't have to redesign your whole life. Just say, this 1 square meter is mine and it's going to feed me. Then choose fast, forgiving crops for your first experiment. I always recommend lettuce mixes, green onions from bulbs, radishes, and herbs. You plant them once, you watch them grow, and in a few weeks you're eating something that didn't come with a barcode. Green onions are almost comically easy. Lucas, one of our subscribers, sent me a picture of his first onion garden in a reused plastic container. He had simply taken regular onions from the grocery store, stuck them half into the soil, and watered them. That was all. In about a week, green shoots appeared. In 2 weeks, he was cutting fragrant green tops for his scrambled eggs and soups. He wrote that he hadn't bought a single bunch of green onions in months. Does that change the entire global food system? Alone? Of course not. But imagine every apartment in a city doing at least this. Even this tiny act would send a quiet signal through the system. We're not completely helpless customers. Another powerful secret they don't like to talk about is seed saving. The sales system works best when you constantly have to buy something again and again. Seeds, vegetables, herbs, seedlings, fertilizers, potting mixes, and on. But nature doesn't operate on a subscription model. One good plant can give you seeds for an entire next season, sometimes for multiple seasons. Oliver, for example, started with one tomato plant he ordered online. He babied it, watched it, harvested sweet, flavorful cherry tomatoes, and at the end of the season he chose the best, most perfect fruits from the healthiest branches. He scooped out the seeds, dried them properly, and stored them in a paper envelope. The following year he had more plants than he knew what to do with, all from that original purchase. The math here is pretty simple. A single packet of tomato seeds might give you 20 to 50 seeds. If even half become strong plants, and each plant produces dozens or hundreds of fruits, what exactly are you paying for when you buy tomatoes at the store? You're paying for convenience, yes, and for all the steps in the chain, but you're also paying because no one told you that keeping a small, self-replenishing seed bank is neither difficult nor dangerous. I've seen people maintain collections of seeds in shoeboxes, labeled with just the plant name and year. No special equipment, no fancy gadgets. Just a little attention once or twice a year, and your garden becomes less of a consumer and more of a producer. Let's talk about taste and nutrition for a moment, because price is not only about money. There's a hidden cost to eating food that traveled hundreds or thousands of kilometers, sat in storage, and was bred more for transportation and shelf life than for flavor. When you cut a tomato that was ripened by the sun in your own yard or balcony, it's almost unfair to compare it to the supermarket version. Rose, who had never liked tomatoes in her life, grew one simple cherry tomato variety on her porch. The first time she tasted it, she said, "If tomatoes tasted like this in the store, I would eat them every day." The difference is that your plant doesn't care about logistics or marketing. It only cares about growing and reproducing, and you benefit from that raw, uncomplicated energy. Now I know what some of you are thinking. This all sounds lovely, but I have no time, no energy, and probably no talent. Let me be honest, gardening does require some time and at least a bit of consistency. You can't disappear for a month and expect everything to be perfect, but the idea that you must spend hours every day sweating in the garden is a myth. Many of the most impactful steps take minutes. Sowing a handful of seeds is a 5-minute task. Watering pots can be done in the time it takes for your coffee to cool down. Checking leaves while you're on the phone with a friend, pinching off a yellow leaf, noticing a pest early, these are small actions that accumulate. The real stumbling block isn't time or talent, it's mindset. We were trained to see food as something that appears in stores, just like we see apps appear in our phones. The process is invisible, so we assume it's complicated. But when you watch a seed sprout in a reused yogurt cup on your windowsill, that story starts to crumble. You realize how few inputs are truly needed. A bit of soil, some water, some light, and a small container. This realization alone is dangerous to a system built around maximum dependence. If a child grows up seeing their parents routinely harvest tomatoes, herbs, and salads from a balcony, that child's relationship with food prices will never be the same as someone who has only known the supermarket. Another layer they don't talk about is compost. Food waste is a huge problem, and it also represents money literally going into the trash. Every carrot peel, coffee ground, crushed eggshell, banana peel, those are all nutrients that you have already paid for once. When you throw them away, you pay again through garbage fees and environmental costs. But when you compost, even in a small way, you start closing the loop. Ivy, who lives on the 4th floor without an elevator, thought composting was impossible for her. Then she discovered small-scale methods: a bucket with a lid on the balcony, some dry leaves or shredded paper, and regular turning. It didn't smell, it didn't attract pests, and in a few months she had a dark, rich material that made her potted plants explode with growth. With compost, you slowly stop buying so much commercial fertilizer, which is another recurring cost that quietly erodes your budget. It doesn't mean you can never buy it, but you become less dependent. Each time you harvest a tomato grown in soil enriched with your own kitchen scraps, you're not just saving on the fruit itself. You're saving on the fertilizer that would have been used to grow an industrial tomato. Again, it's about cutting through layers of cost that most people never think about. Let's also address fear of failure. You will kill plants. You will forget to water something. You will misread a label, plant something too deep or too shallow, and wonder why nothing came up. That's normal. The problem is that most people interpret their first failed attempt as proof that they just can't garden. But every good gardener I know has a graveyard of plants behind them. The difference is that they keep going. They also learn to choose beginner-friendly crops first instead of jumping into the most fussy plants straight away. If your first gardening experience is with something unforgiving, you're going to get discouraged quickly. So, what are some of the easiest wins? Apart from lettuce, herbs and green onions, I'd add radishes and bush beans. Radishes are sprint runners of the garden world. They go from seed to harvest in about a month. That's quicker feedback than most self-improvement habits. Bush beans, on the other hand, are generous plants that keep producing if you keep picking. They can grow in deep containers with a sunny spot, and they offer you protein and crunch that can replace at least some of the canned or frozen vegetables you'd normally buy. Putting these quick-win plants into your first season is like giving yourself motivation fuel. Another perspective most people never hear is that gardening doesn't have to look pretty to be effective. Yes, we all love those photos of perfect raised beds and Instagram gardens, but food doesn't care if your pot is an old bucket or a designer container. Lucas started half his plants in mismatched plastic boxes he found at home. Ivy grew tomatoes in paint buckets she cleaned and drilled drainage holes into. Did anyone walking by know they were looking at ugly containers? No, they just saw lush green plants and ripe fruit. You don't need a big budget to start. You need some creativity and a willingness to reuse what you have. Think about how many times you've heard the phrase, support local farmers or buy organic as the main alternative to industrial food. Those are good things when you can afford them, but they still keep you in the role of a buyer. Growing some of your food moves you, little by little, into the role of producer. Even if 80 to 90% of your food still comes from the store, those 10 to 20% that you grow can have a disproportionate impact on your wallet and your confidence. A big part of your budget often goes to perishable, fresh items like greens, herbs, tomatoes, berries. These are exactly the crops that are easiest to grow in small spaces. Rose told me something that stuck with me. After 2 seasons of balcony gardening, she didn't suddenly become rich. She still had bills and worries like the rest of us. But she said, the biggest change is psychological. I don't feel completely at the mercy of the supermarket anymore. If prices go up again, I'm annoyed, but I'm not panicked because I know I can always expand my little garden. That feeling of backup, of a safety net you control, is priceless. And this is exactly why nobody in big retail is rushing to hand you simple guides on how to start. Let's not forget community. When more people start growing food, even on a tiny scale, they often end up with small surpluses. Extra basil, too many cucumbers, extra packets of seeds, a tray of seedlings. That's when natural sharing begins. Neighbours swap a bag of tomatoes for a pot of mint. A co-worker offers extra zucchini seedlings. A local online group organises a plant swap day. Every time this happens, someone buys a little less from the store. It's gentle, it's small, but again, imagine it multiplied. You might also be surprised how quickly your knowledge grows once you start. The first season you're reading seed packets and trying not to mix up the instructions. The second season, you're already saying things like, this year I'll plant my tomatoes a little deeper, or I'll interplant my lettuce under the shade of taller plants. By the third season, you're probably that weird friend who says, if you just stick that sprouting garlic clove into some soil, you'll never need to buy garlic greens again. That's how habits spread, one small success story at a time. It's important to remember that plants want to grow. Their whole genetic program is designed for survival and reproduction. You're not fighting against nature, you're cooperating with it. When you water a small pot of soil with seeds inside, you're basically saying, "Here's what you need, do your thing." The seed already contains the blueprint. Your role is more like a gentle caretaker than a commander. Once that mindset clicks, gardening feels less like a technical skill and more like a shared project with living organisms that actually want to help you. Now let's address one more hidden factor behind food prices: storage and waste. Supermarkets throw away a shocking amount of food that doesn't get sold in time. All of that waste is built into the prices of what does get sold. At home, when you harvest exactly what you need, one handful of basil, one ripe tomato, one head of lettuce, you almost eliminate that waste. You don't keep a bag of salad going brown in your fridge because you take only what's ready and what you'll eat. Over months and years, the money not spent on food that ends up in the trash is significant. You also start eating more in tune with the seasons. When your tomato plant is loaded with fruit, you eat more tomatoes. When lettuce is at its peak, you eat more salads. This seasonal rhythm naturally balances your diet and reduces the urge to buy expensive out-of-season produce that had to be flown or trucked in from far away. Again, no one in the large-scale food industry is excited about you becoming comfortable with this rhythm, because it means you're less likely to pay high prices for those off-season long-distance items. A lot of people ask about soil because it sounds technical, but good soil is just a living community of tiny organisms doing their job. When you add compost, avoid harsh chemicals, and keep the soil covered with plants or mulch, you're basically feeding and protecting that community. In return, the soil feeds your plants. You don't need a lab or a degree to understand this. You can literally see the difference when you compare a pot with dull, compacted soil and a pot with rich, crumbly, dark earth full of roots and life. Plants in healthy soil grow stronger, resist pests better, and produce more, which again means you get more food from the same small space. I want you to also think long-term. The first year, maybe you only manage basil and lettuce. The second year, you add tomatoes, peppers, maybe a small potato bucket. The third year, you're saving seeds, composting, and sharing cuttings with friends. By the fourth year, your garden is no longer an experiment. It's part of your life, like brushing your teeth or making coffee. By then, calculating the exact money saved becomes tricky because the effects spread. Better health from fresher food, less stress from knowing you have some control, stronger community ties through plant sharing. And still, from the perspective of the food industry, this is the scenario that makes them nervous. Independent, confident, semi-self-sufficient people don't panic buy every time there's a shortage or price spike. They adjust, expand their gardens, swap more with neighbours, get creative in the kitchen. They're less vulnerable to marketing that says, you have no choice but to pay this much. The more of us move in this direction, the more the entire pricing structure of fresh food feels pressure to adapt. That's what I mean when I say that if people truly knew and acted on this knowledge, food prices as we know them would have to change. So where do you start practically if until now you've just nodded along but haven't done anything? Start ridiculously small, pick one edible plant and commit to growing it successfully. Not 5, not 10, 1. Maybe it's basil on your kitchen windowsill. Maybe it's a cherry tomato in a pot by the door. Maybe it's a box of mixed salad greens. Go through the whole cycle with that one. Prepare the pot, sow or plant, water, watch, harvest, maybe even save seeds if it's the right plant. Once you've lived through that cycle, something in your mind will shift. You stop seeing food as only a product and start seeing it as a process you can participate in. After that, expand step by step. Add a second plant the next season. Try one new technique, like composting in a small bucket or starting seeds indoors earlier in the year. Don't overwhelm yourself with perfection. A messy, half-improvised garden that actually exists and feeds you is worth more than a perfect plan that never leaves your notebook. The food you don't have to buy, the confidence you gain, and the skills you build are all forms of quiet resistance to a system that would prefer you to stay passive. You're not going to collapse the global food industry by yourself, But that's not the point. The point is to reclaim a piece of your life that was handed over to corporations without you really noticing. Every pot of parsley, every self-grown tomato, every batch of compost is a small vote for a different way of relating to food. And when many people cast those small votes, the system eventually has to respond. Prices, choices, and priorities start to shift. That's what they don't want you to realize. That you're not just a consumer in this story. You can be a creator. So, from all of us here at Botanic Haven, I invite you to take that first practical step. Choose one spot, one plant, one small action. Let it be imperfect, let it be humble, but let it be real. Then watch how, slowly but surely, your shopping list shrinks, your meals taste better, and your sense of independence grows along with your plants.